Howdy folks, this is another installment of the Antique Arms Almanac, and my handle on gunpost.ca is Calgary Veterally. And so what I have to show you here today is a Hopkins & Allen Blue Jacket number 2. It's a 5-shot, it's a single action, 32 rimfire short revolver. And as you've probably read in the title, or just noticed from looking at this thing, this is a beautifully done factory engraved example. And this one's kind of unique because it's not just factory engraved, it's factory hand engraved. And the reason that there's an important distinction there is because Hopkins & Allen developed a engraving system that was almost purely mechanical, and it used a hardened steel pin to put a bunch of little dots all over, and the designs tend to be a little bit more simple. As well as if there are lines, usually if you look at it really close, you'll see that between the two dots, or if there's a line, you'll see dots along them. And the reason for that is they quite literally connected the dots. This is done by hand, and this is kind of like more like painting, whereas the pinprick engraving system, mechanical engraving system, is a cheaper form of engraving, and it's kind of like paint by numbers. That's kind of the difference there. But this is a very beautiful example. It's got most of the nickel on it. There's a few spots, like as you can see right there. And I'll get to the cylinder here in a minute. And a couple little scratches here. But overall, it's in pretty good shape. Here's the other side. And we have the same design repeated. And we'll get a close-up on everything here in a minute. And basically, this uses the patented little blade type cylinder pin release, and I think this one's gold or brass plated. It's probably gold wash. That was patented by Samuel Hopkins, I believe in 1871, and all of the XL series pretty well revolvers, the earlier ones, that are single actions, use this patented feature. And there's also a bunch of copies that use this feature, but I'll take a little bit of a closer look here. As you can see, come on, there she is. We have actually a scene painted. There's 3 mountains, a little boat with a person, looks like they're canoeing on a lake. So really fine little work here. There is, I think, a little bit of damage right there, unfortunately, on the screw, and some scratching there. But other than that, it's fairly legible. It's so shiny, this nickel, it catches the light. You gotta be careful when you're filming stuff. And as you can see, hold on, there's some dull spots on the cylinder, like in the cylinder flutes there. There is some nickel loss on this thing, but mechanically it works great. Index as well. The spring is actually very tight. Index as well. That pin I just noticed is walking around a little bit, but that's not really a big deal. You just get a hardened punch and tap it. But let's have a closer look at this. The mechanics on this are excellent. That spring is very strong. There's our name, Hopkins & Allen Manufacturing Company, Blue Jacket number 2. Patented March 28th, 1871, and that mainly pertains to this latch here, because everything else internally is not really super well patented. It's all kind of all these revolvers work on very similar principles. But yeah, we have some engraving here on the back strap. We have this repeated floral pattern. I don't know if we had a really good look at the cylinder, but it's just the same pattern repeated. Kind of floral pattern. We have a little border, and this is on both sides at the bottom here. This side obviously has the little scene, little picture, the 3 mountains. I've seen a few different pictures. You'll have a sailboat and a couple other things. I've never seen this design before. This could be one of a kind. Maybe they did a series. I'm not entirely sure. We have this very cool little box geometry. We have engraving all the way out to the bore, the end of the muzzle. We have the Engraving on the top, even goes around the front sight, and it's repeated there. Funny enough, there's no engraving on the bottom here. The only thing is you get a checkered spur trigger there. That screw is lightly buggered, but still functional. And I think the only really other damage on this gun to point out is there's a little bit of kind of marking on the, come on, focus, cylinder pin there, just see on the head. Other than that, she's in very good shape and very pretty wood. Nickel's pretty good. This side of the grips is noticeably darker. It's got more oil in the wood, I imagine. It's typically what happens with these things. One side of the grip will age differently. That's not really moving anymore now that I've moved that pin back in. And I think my favorite part of this is just the, move my hand to point it out, is the border around the text here. It's very, very neat. That's very nice too. But basically, see if I can get this apart. This is very tight. No wonder there's plier marks on that pin. I'm just going to take it off camera for a second and kind of bring it in close here and push down on it. We'll get our disassembly tool, chopstick. Oh boy, this is really in there. Ah, there she goes. Yeah, it's got a manhandle. I just had to really push down on the pin there. That's kind of a testament to how tight everything fits together with this gun. It was well made. There's our ratchet teeth. You know, they're reasonably sharp there. This thing got an indexes, as you saw. See if I can get some contrast. White piece of paper somewhere handy. Yeah, here we go. Take this letter. So you can see, bore's pretty clean. Chambers are good. Front of the cylinder there's a bit of pitting. It's there. This gun was fired and used. I mean, I think this was probably carried a fair bit just due to this. This is typically when people keep this in their pocket and the oil from their body and clothes gets into the wood. It's also sometimes when it sits against a holster, you'll get that sort of atypical, asymmetrical, I should say, wear. It's typical. And the bore on this thing is actually pretty decent. Let's see if we can get some of that. I do have a bore light here. You know, pretty standard fare there. A little shallow, to be honest. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but I think that's perfectly fine for shooting soft lead 32 rimfire bullets or round balls if you're going to shoot this thing nowadays. But it's clean bore. There's hardly any pitting, not really. This cylinder pin is a little bit tight, honestly. Like, I have to use my disassembly tool, but you know, as long as you don't have little manlet hands, you should be able to get this thing apart. But you know, there's the hand, and there's the cylinder locking stud, which has a pretty strong spring. Like, you really got to push it down. And I'm gonna dry fire it, so clench your teeth because there's no cylinder for this hammer to run into. As you can see, the tip of the hammer is actually in really good shape. Some of these are really mangled, but it's still got nickel and it's still sharp. So here we go. Bang. That sound, you know, dry firing a gun. Oh no, don't dry fire your antiques. Well, here you go. But overall, this gun, I would say, is mechanically excellent. The gun works perfectly. And of course, we have the pin being very tight and not worn. Some of these are rusted in, some of these are really not like great, but if you put a little bit of oil on this pin, I'm sure it would come out just fine. But that has a very strong spring underneath this little retainer blade latch. And if you have any other questions about this gun, you can always send me a message or leave a comment on the video. And yeah, it's the Hopkins & Allen Blue Jacket.